Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Conversations with Dr. Yolanda. I am so excited to be back here again in 2024 with these amazing women leaders. We're going to be talking about leadership. On these conversations, we're talking with those that have launched their books, entrepreneurship, and we understand that around business, entrepreneurship, higher ed, corporate America, leadership is at the top, and it determines how successful they'll be in those spaces. And so I am so excited to have this conversation leading into International Women's Day. I wanted to really pull this conversation forward and even continue afterwards, really having these conversations around leadership in corporate and higher ed and entrepreneurship. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. I want to welcome Dr. Stephanie Kirkland and Dr. Carolyn Foster, who's going to join me in this conversation. I want to start out and have Dr. Carolyn, will you introduce yourself to those that will be watching or listening? And then Dr. Stephanie, if you'll come right after her and share a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Yolanda, first of all, for having me here. It's an honor to be here. I love being in this kind of space. Just to give a little bit of background about me and who I am, I always say yes, I am a business professor in the Levin School of Business at Kennesaw State University, but I did not grow up in academia. I grew up through the hard knocks of corporate America. I have sat in the C-suite. I've been a vice president of human resources. Most of my work has been with Fortune 500 companies. I have worked with other organizations. I've also had a stint as a consultant, working as a consultant, having my own consulting firm as I do now. And I have seen it from leadership from three sides. Working in academia, certainly working in the C-suite, being a former C-suite club member myself, and also seeing it as an entrepreneur. And I'm so excited about this conversation.
Great. Thank you, Carolyn. Dr. Stephanie.
Well, hello. Again, I am honored as well to be in this conversation, to be a part of really creating another dynamic of dialogue, right, around the shifts and things that really do need to take place for us to be who we are called to be in all of these spaces. My name is Dr. Stephanie M. Kirkland. The name of my company is Identity Dynamics. It is a leadership development company. Dr. Carolyn has had three sides. I'm a lifelong entrepreneur. Majority of my work has always been with women in leadership, how they shape and show up. And so my concentration is on identity-centered leadership, which is a framework that I have honed over these last 15 years to support women who want to leverage who they are in the spaces that they're in, understanding what that looks like, and then how to really implement that, whether it's corporate, entrepreneurship, higher education, understanding that around my doctoral work, especially understanding that who you are, your sense of self is your superpower. And you have to own that and you have to leverage with that for success.
Yes, yes, yes. All of us have been in some spaces where we were in leadership roles or we were working with leaders, and we've seen the good, the bad, and the not so cute in those spaces. And even as younger professionals, I know for myself, I struggled kind of navigating in those spaces as a young professional. As I have uh, as I have gotten seasoned, I'm not going to say old. I am seasoned in this career path
I
and
love it.
working in corporate, working in higher ed, working as an entrepreneur. There are some things I think that based on our experience, we can share with the generation coming behind us, those that are in the spaces now, that will help them be able to navigate those spaces and those places better. And so I want us to dive in, and I'd love to hear from both of you. When you think about leadership, What does that mean to you? And I want to go to you, Dr. Stephanie, first. When you think about leadership, what does it mean to you?
Leadership to me begins with self-leadership,
Mhm.
because I don't believe that we can impact and support others without understanding, supporting, and leading ourselves. So I think leadership is round, right? Even though we know the formal definition of leadership being around how to influence and focus teams in the direction you want them to go, I believe it's so much more nuanced than that, right? It is how do we support others with regards to who they are and how they're showing up through who we are. How do we influence and impact others with our gift, right? With who we are, to support their show up and how they're moving forward in where they're going, as you context to emerging leaders, right?
Mhm.
My responsibility now to them is, how does my influence, how does my impact now support the development of theirs? And I believe that people will walk in the spaces they're called to when we do that. So leadership to me is more of a guiding and an influence rather
Mm,
than a navigating of telling people what to do and where to go.
that's so good. Dr. Carolyn, let me hear from you.
I absolutely resonate with everything Dr. Stephanie said. I believe that leadership starts again with internal clarity,
Mm,
understanding who you are,
yes.
understanding what your motivations are, and understanding, getting in contact with that, what I call authenticity. It's
Mhm.
understanding who you are as an authentic person. We have
Yes.
all heard that saying, people follow you because of who you know you are, not
Mhm.
necessarily what you do. They
Mhm.
follow authentic leaders. So unless we have a clear understanding of that authenticity of who we are not going to be able to correctly influence and guide those who might be around us. So I
Yeah.
think it really begins with that clarity,
Mhm.
that authenticity. I also think it begins. Leadership can be done at any level. You don't have to be a vice president or a senior director or a
Mhm.
senior manager. Leadership begins. You can lead from any level in the organization or in your business.
Mhm.
And that's where it really becomes important to understand that clarity and that authenticity so you don't lose.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I know, Dr. Stephanie, you're doing some work around identity leadership.
Mhm.
What made you focus on that? I know you've done some research around it, and why did you decide to do it? And what have you found as you have been working in that space?
The conversation around identity centered leadership started with me. It started with my own journey of understanding who I was, what that meant, because as you all know, we hold so many roles and responsibilities. And as Dr. Carolyn said, with regards to that last piece that she was saying about how we lead, I believe, and I use this term, we lead our impact. So it doesn't matter what position that we're in, we are all leaders. And as a result of that, we lead our impact, whatever realm of influence that we're in. So I found myself living in roles and responsibilities and not living in authenticity.
Mm,
Mm.
yes,
And I
yes.
started asking myself the question, what is all of this? Like, I ain't fulfilled. Everybody happy but me. Now, something got to give because I don't feel I touch purpose yet. Right.
Yes.
And it was just me asking myself the question, like, there's more to me having skill set, right? Because a lot of us, even in that executive space, we got skill, but we don't know who we are, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Mm.
And we allow our skills and those roles and responsibilities to be definers for us. And I was just like, that is not who I am. I didn't feel that fulfillment or that tap in. And so my whole journey with regards to that, I remember, I give my little testimony about watching Joyce Myers, and she was talking about Noah and the ark, and you know how you see something good, and you be like, oh, now that was good. You know how you just sit after you watch a good, that was good. You're talking to yourself, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
And then
absolutely.
and then I heard in my heart, if you could say one thing for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Ooh,
That's good.
And I
Yeah.
that's
And
good.
I was like, I say a lot of things, right? Roles, responsibilities, skill set. And then you know how you dismiss it. And I heard it again, y'all. I heard, if you could say one thing for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Mm,
And so
mm,
after the second time, you got to pay attention when they
exactly.
come back. And I had to say out of my mouth, I don't know. I don't know what I would say. I say a lot of things. And so that took me on that identity journey. Who am I? Why am I here? What is my what is my purpose? And then I came to realize that purpose was me. I
Mm,
was the gift. Purpose was not outside of me. It was not something external, because everybody I researched, what I noticed was they had a message. And so I started leaning in that. What is the message my life speaks? What is the message
yeah.
my life is called to speak? And that began my journey around identity centered leadership. So now, how do I leverage who I am in these spaces where the essence of who I am is what is directing my influence, and not the role, responsibility, cultural norms, trauma, bad lived experience, but me, the essence. And that's where the conversation of identity centered leadership began. And I began teaching it, then started going to school to support it. And so it ended up with my doctoral work. And here I am with this
Yeah.
conversation of identity centered leadership.
Absolutely. Carolyn, as you were listening to Dr. Stephanie, and when you take yourself back to those corporate settings, even as entrepreneur, even in higher ed, what have you seen in reference to identity leadership in those spaces that individuals are struggling with?
The main thing, as I was listening to Dr. Stephanie, it was so very clear. Women, not just women, but mostly women, lose who they are once they get to that leadership title, whatever that might be.
Mhm.
More women lose themselves. They lose their identity. They lose their passion,
Mm,
because they're trying to fit a role.
yes.
They're they're morphing into. They
Mm,
do not have the set of self
mhm.
where they are able to influence from that place of authenticity. So they're constantly running and morphing, and let me run and do this, let me run and do this, let me make this person happen. No, it all begins with you examining who you are. I
Yeah.
can tell you from my personal perspective, and Yolanda knows this is what my book is about. Um, I ended up in leadership positions after examining, after taking that deep dive into who am I and what makes me authentic, what makes me an authentic leader. I realized I was in companies where I should not be, because
Mm,
the culture of that company, there was never going to be a way that the culture of that organization was going to match who I was
mhm.
as an authentic leader. And
Mm,
then you're left with having to make some decisions. And that's your fork in the road.
mhm.
But that is the number one thing I see, just looking around, looking in organizations, looking personally at myself. It is so easy to lose who you are.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I can remember even as a young professional going in thinking that I would be placed in leadership positions because I was good at all these things. Oh, I could multitask with the best of them. I could get a lot done, and at the end of the day, am I able to lead people where I'm not necessarily doing all this work,
Yep.
that I am building a team and putting them in
Mm,
the places in these areas where they're good at where I don't have to do everything. And
Yes.
being able to manage and balance all that and delegate, just
Mhm.
because you can do it all doesn't mean you need to be doing it all.
Amen.
Absolutely. And that's where we have the tendency as women to fail. We
Yeah.
can buy the bacon, bring home the bacon, cook the bacon at work. We can do all of these skills.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, that is why women experience such burnout,
Yes.
such, you know, levels of depression and a lot of other things, because we're not leading from a place of wisdom.
Mhm.
Wisdom will tell us leadership can be risky
Yes.
because you're teaching a team, you're trying to empower and influence a team around you
Mhm.
to understand that vision that you have so that they can use their gifts and their talents to make this vision come to pass.
Mhm.
And your role is not doing the work, but it has flipped, as it should, to how do I influence others to
Exactly.
get this work
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Exactly. And Dr. Stephanie, in when you're thinking about women in leadership in corporate or as entrepreneurs, and when you're going out and you're speaking and you're training, what are some things that you're hearing from women that they're struggling with?
done?
The first thing that I get from when I do executive coaching with C-suite is, Stephanie, is it me? I don't think that is me, but is it me?
Exactly. Yes.
Every time, like,
Mhm.
we're safe. Is it me? And I have to say, no,
Mhm.
it's not you. And I
Yeah.
think part of my role in that space is helping them to recognize, right? There are external factors. And the biggest gift that I am to them is language.
Mm.
Giving them language for the experiences that they are having so that now they have the capacity to make the decisions that they need to make where they are.
Mhm.
And that's the biggest thing that I see. They're having experiences without capacity. They're
Mm.
having
Yeah.
experiences without language, right? And so that's what I'm recognizing. And that's why I've been doing this work around. So let me give you language for that. I call myself an instructional coach because
Yeah.
mine is a doctorate of education. So we talk around that lens of, instructional coaching. And so I use that even in my business and my corporate spaces, that part of my job is not only to support you and to be that sounding board so that you can make the decisions that you need to make, but especially with the global majority now, which is our Black women and women of color, we are experiencing a capacity deficit, and we're
Mhm.
using language that is not representative of our experiences to define it because we're not having the bigger conversations. I hear all the time people say, well, I try to get an executive coach, but there is no one who is my color. There is no one who is representative of my experience. And what they end up having is coaches telling them that they're the problem, or
Mhm.
coaches telling them that they need to be more sensitive.
Mhm.
Everything that really goes against someone who understands what's going on with regards to external factors that impact marginalized communities can
Yes.
actually speak to. So that's what hits me first is
Mhm.
is that capacity deficit,
Mm.
so that you can say, and then they'll go, oh my God, that's what that is. That's what that is. That's what you call, oh yeah, girl. Oh, that and so the ahas and the relief, right? And the
Mhm.
happiness, because it's not that they're not smart, it's not that they don't get it, is they
Right.
just don't have the capacity for the experience.
Exactly.
That's good.
Exactly. That is good. When we think about those that are in positions that are bringing leaders in, what would you guys say to those in those leadership positions that are doing those searches for the next leaders that they're bringing into their companies? What would you advise them when they're in that process of really looking for those individuals?
I think one of the things you need to look for when bringing in leaders into your organization is that shared vision. Do they understand the culture?
Yes.
Do they understand those things that are important to the foundation of the business of the organization and even down to the department? Because you can be authentic, you can be a number of things, you can be an exceptional leader. But if you are constantly finding conflict with what that organization foundationally is standing for and what it's doing, because that will absolutely, and I'm sure Dr. Stephanie will agree, that will play out in the organization. You will see it in every place within the organization, and you're wondering, no, that's not working, and that's not working. And why is that? Because there is a friction there. One of the things I found is that you've got to take a significant amount of time to really understand that culture. Every corporation, I don't care how big or how small, has a corporate culture.
Mm-hmm.
And the most effective leaders are ones that understand the culture and where there's a natural flow with it, or you're able to work with it. It might not be natural, but you're able to work within it. I think it's important to spend some time in exploring their understanding of the organization, what it stands for, and what that culture is. Because then you can it's easy to work together. It's easy to work. You're not fighting little stuff. It can flow.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yes.
yes.
Can you kind of ask the question again, Dr. Yolanda?
When you're in a position in a corporation where you're the one responsible for bringing new leadership in,
Mhm.
what are some things that, as you're in the process of bringing those individuals in, that you should be looking strategically at for that next person you want to bring in?
I think it's really.
What are some things that they may be missing when
Mhm.
they're in that process of really searching out for the next person?
Yeah, I think they're going to have to look beyond the resume,
Yes.
and begin to really investigate questions that impact conversations around communication,
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yes.
adaptability,
Hmm.
the ability to creatively problem solve,
Hmm.
manage, right? I think those intricacies, because especially in the season that we're in corporate
Yes.
spaces and in higher ed and all of the changes and things that are going on, I think we need to be more in depth around, but it goes back to our original conversation about identity, right? Who is
Yes.
this person? Who is this person
Mhm.
sitting in front of me without the roles and responsibilities? What is their core leaning with regards to these conversations? Am I just going to get somebody who's going to morph into the culture, like Dr. Carolyn was talking about, that cultural understanding? Or am I leveraging the
Hmm.
gift that could possibly be sitting in front of me, who
Hmm.
might not have all the bells and whistles, but they got good problem solving?
Yes.
They're available to a bigger conversation. They communicate well. They
Hmm.
have empathy. They can see, visually as well as strategically. And I
Yes.
think when you can look for those types of things, you can shape and mold who comes.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
You can be, strategic around where you place them and what that looks like when you know what their core is with regards to how they're going to show up in your
Yeah,
organization is very important.
it is. It is. And I think a lot of people that are responsible for bringing in new leadership, sometimes they're looking for somebody like them and they may not necessarily need anybody like them.
And it doesn't
You
work
need
like
to be looking at those the gifting in front of you. It may be somebody coming in that's not like anybody in the corporation,
that. Yes.
bringing something that you're missing.
Yes.
And being able to ask the right questions to see if it is something that you're missing that they're going to bring that's going to grow the company. That's
Mm.
going, because if you have everybody in the company, everybody's just alike, you're missing some things. And I think when you're interviewing, going deeper, as you guys have saying, more than just that resume, more than just that skill, can they be in a room with people they don't agree with and still share what they believe and be able to work through those issues and still bring their full self to that conversation.
Yes. Yes.
And I think a lot of times people struggle with that, or they see the people coming that may have something they don't have as their competition. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And I was about to say, and those outdated narratives of what leadership is keeping people in that paradigm, right?
mm-hmm.
Because we're not allowing difference to be the leadership strategy, because we don't appreciate the difference that is in other people, because we don't see individuals and we're trying to put people in these little boxes that have already been established, we miss out. And we have all of this false unity, right?
Yes,
Because unity really is about what? Going to the objective. It's not how we're getting there, because then that freedom of difference allows different perspectives, allows those courageous conversations, right?
yes,
Because
yes,
just because we don't agree does not mean that I'm right, you're wrong. There can be win-win relationships. And
right.
we're not teaching that because we're looking for a false unity because of the structures that we have leadership development in.
You know, Dr. Stephanie, you said something so huge. You said it is possible to have win-win situations,
Mm.
even if you don't agree.
Yes.
We are, it is time. Diversity is beautiful. And diversity allows different perspectives. It allows looking at a situation and considering, wow, I never thought about that. That can
Yes.
only happen when you have individuals with different strengths that are sitting around the table to be able
Hmm.
to take a look at the problem, to be able to take a look at how do we get to this objective and how are we considering this. It is so important when we're looking at, as you had alluded earlier, that global, we're global. You know,
Yes.
Yes,
we are global. And the manner in which we might communicate might be something very different to
Yes.
someone in Belize or someone
Mhm.
in India who is also at that table. But
Yes.
when we have everybody and we are allowing their narrative to come forward, we're able to make better decisions,
yes,
Hmm.
perspective, and more information. It requires that we be brave. No, I tell people I don't want anybody like me. I
Correct.
don't want anybody like me.
Correct.
exactly.
I want other individuals to bring their their gifting, because
Yes.
all of the gifts together create something amazing. And
Yeah,
that's a quantum leap for some organizations.
it
Mhm.
is.
Quantum leap.
Yes, yes. They struggle with that difference piece. And,
Yes.
Hmm.
and how we get them to that place until they start like just jumping in and being courageous and say, it could not work and it could work. This person could not work or work.
Hmm.
But I think if companies start seeing people coming with those gifts as a value to the organization, and if they're looking at, I challenge any leader that's looking at their goals to increase their revenue and they're not looking at how diversity of those at the table can increase that they
Yes.
may want to step back and take a look at that. Because I think that diversity piece with different skills, background, my background and experience may be the what I have to solve a problem that you're dealing with, but you will never
Hmm.
know it if you don't have those people at the table and you're not hiring those people that look different, sound different, from different backgrounds, sitting at the table with you. You're not going to know if they have the solution to what you've been working on.
Hmm.
It
Yeah.
requires organizations to take that challenge. Diversity isn't a threat.
Yes.
It's not a threat. It's that key factor that can not only set you apart, but put you above.
Yes.
Time out for organizations to want, everyone to walk like a duck, talk like a duck, walk like a duck,
Mm-hmm.
and accept and understand the beauty of having diverse diversity in all of its flavors and
Mhm.
forms to be
Yeah.
able to allow you to create that great product, that great end result.
Yeah. And that also calls for the chipping away at language that people fear.
Yeah.
Language, a simple word like binary scares people, right? But if we really look at it for what it means, binary means that there is one or the other, right? There's just two ways to look at it. I'm right, you're wrong. And we don't realize a lot of our corporate structures are foundationally planted on this understanding: if I'm right, you have to be wrong.
Right.
And so that is literally keeping us from the conversation of difference at the table, because then we can't even get into the gray, because the gray says that there is what? Conversation in the middle of your
Mm.
opinion and mine. And
Yeah.
we can filter through difference to get to the objective. Unity is the end result. And the
Yeah.
middle and the transactions and the conversation, which goes back to my identity conversation. If you don't know who you are, then you're
Mhm.
threatened by my opinion. If you don't know what that means for you, if you don't understand your beliefs and values, your lived experience, where that has come from, that leads you to this place, and you
Mhm.
now begin to say, I need to remove all of these prototypes that I've been living through so
Yeah.
that I can see my own difference. And part
Mm.
of the challenge is the people who are pushing don't even recognize their own difference to have the capacity to appreciate the difference in others. And
Yeah.
so if they just do the identity work to appreciate their own difference, their literal mental capacity to appreciate difference in others expands, and we can
Yes.
have a bigger conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When you guys think about the journey that women have had in leadership across the board, whether it's higher ed, government, political, what are some of the things, we I want us to talk about kind of what some of the issues still are, and then what are some things that we're doing well in really training women in leadership, women of color in leadership, because we've seen the struggles for years in different settings, how they may be in those positions, and how do we encourage them to like bring the next person along. So the first part of that is, what are we seeing? We've seen across the years about women in leadership. What are some things you're still seeing that's not working, and then those things that are working?
I think in terms of what is not working, it's not a fact that the women are not skilled at
Mm,
that level.
Yeah.
yes.
They certainly are skilled at that level. They're still not being given permission to lead. I think that many of the appointments, and I want to say just that, appointments are more superficial and not allowing women to truly take the reign and lead. You can do this, but you can only go so, you can only go so
Mhm.
far. You can only
Right.
do this. But yet you're in that space. You're there having the skill, having the ability, having the knowledge. It's just not safe yet.
Mm,
It's not that safe place.
Mm,
yeah,
mm,
I agree.
Um, I see that is still we have a tendency in this country to swing from left to right and then back to, we'd love to kind of get somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
With all of the talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, there was, so much reaction to that. And there was, so you were getting people to those levels, you were getting women of color to those levels, but still not making it safe to lead. Why? It speaks to your point, Dr. Stephanie. Many parts of the organizations are not fully identifying themselves yet to make it a safe place for these new individuals coming on to lead. How do you do that if you don't even know what you do?
Right.
Yes.
Right. Yes.
That's one of the things that I see that still is lingering. It's changing, but it's still lingering.
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing that you said, Dr. Carolyn, about what's right is we are educated and powerful. we got the skills. And y'all, in the back of my mind sometimes, even though I know this shift towards not needing education and I know that is a good thing, I really do believe that. But I also believe that there's a little piece up under there is because we have now broken that ceiling of education. And now there's this push to kind of take away the authority and the power that rested in that little line that kept us from getting into those spaces. So, that's my little 2 cents about that piece right there. But I'm happy about it, but I know there's something else going. I'm like, yeah. We got all this. We got all the education now. What now? What?
Right.
Oh, it's not important anymore. It's not important. Everybody can get the job now. But that wasn't.
Isn't that interesting?
That wasn't the case when we couldn't have the education. Now that we can have it, now everybody can have the job. I mean, I think that's just my little two. That's just my little 2 cents.
Yeah, something to think about.
That's a whole nother situation and a whole nother conversation. But isn't it interesting? We heard about this cliff that's coming in whatever the year is, where the degrees, individuals that are going for higher education is literally going to fall off of a cliff. And at the same time, you're seeing all of these Fortune 500s. I've seen Google, I've seen Microsoft, I've seen a number of large organizations saying, well, we're not even looking for individuals with degrees anymore because we feel we can train individuals to do what we want them. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So go ahead, get that degree. Get that degree.
Exactly.
That pendulum's going to swing one. Get that degree.
It's going to swing right back.
It's going to swing right back.
And then we're going to be like, oh, but no, get the degree.
Yeah, they're going to get to a point where, our certification no longer really works because we're at this level in technology and they need something additional that we can't even give them. So, now we need that degree. You need to go back to school or we're hiring people with,
Get the degree, sister.
Get the degree. Get the degree.
Get the degree. So, but education is something that I see that is right.
Yes.
What I see that is wrong is really going back to this conversation of people ask me all the time, okay, Stephanie, yes, you're empowering Black women, you're empowering women of color, but what about the systemic issues? Yeah, I know, but what about the systemic issues? So what still is wrong is the systemic issues. And now how do we address it, right? And I've been really turning that. How do we address the systemic issue and how do we begin to shift? Because I believe that this conversation of diversity, inclusion, belonging is not a mental issue. It is a heart issue. It is a mindset shift issue. It's not a training issue. You know what I'm saying? It's not It's not a vocabulary. This is what it is, because then you'll have people who will say, okay, yeah. Now I know what unconscious bias is. Now what?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I done took the training. Now what?
Mm-hmm.
You still have a person who understands the narratives that are taking place, but they're choosing still to not create space so that other people can thrive and increase. And so I believe that part of that conversation is also going after my narrative of identity, right? This conversation is not just for Black people and people of color. This is also for people who don't understand what they bring to the table.
Yes.
And increasing people's capacity for a bigger conversation has to be heart work. It has to be not just language or vocabulary work, but mindset shift work about who they are. And it goes back, when you understand your difference,
Yes.
it gives you the capacity to see other people's difference.
Yes.
But if you never do the personal work, which goes back to what, Dr. Carolyn said about authenticity, if you never do the work, you don't have the capacity to see beyond your own lens of understanding and your own lived experience.
Exactly.
And until they do the work themselves as well, they don't have the capacity to see beyond their self, their lived experience and their narrative. And so that's what's right. And that's what I believe we still have to work on, that it can't just be our development and growth. It has to be everyone's.
Yes. And the reason I believe that people don't do it, because it's hard. It is hard work. Start looking at yourself. You may see some stuff you like. You may see some stuff you don't like.
Yes.
Some stuff you don't even want to face and deal with.
Correct.
And you have to sit with yourself and say, why does diversity, equity, inclusion bother me?
Correct.
Why am I fighting against it? And when you begin to do that internal work, and you have that mindset shift.
Yes.
But people don't want to do the work. It's hard work, and it's easier to learn the definitions. Look at the policy that we have in this institution about diversity, equity, inclusion. Until you do it, as you said, Dr. Steph, until you do the self-work, I believe, this is me believing this, that it's going to take us longer to get to where we really want to be.
Yeah.
You have to do the work. Yes.
You have to not only do the work, but you have to be brave enough to do the work.
Yes.
You also have to understand that it doesn't happen overnight. Now we all have been in places we can get the training done in 3 days and move on with it. We've all done it.
Correct.
But it's going to take longer to do that deep dive, that deep work. There are some organizations that will tell you that, and I'll be honest, I've done that research. We don't see the bottom line impact of what doing this work does.
Correct.
I tend to disagree.
Definitely.
I absolutely tend to disagree, but you have a large number of corporations that are saying, we don't see how this is going to connect and hit our bottom line when it does. These are the reasons why it's hard. It's hard to take a look at yourself. It's hard with you and 8 other people around that executive table taking a look at themselves. Some ugly stuff that you are going to have to come to an agreement with can come up. And I believe some organizations are looking at that quicker fix, that quicker superficial fix, rather than doing that deep dive, which is going to be long lasting, meaningful, and far more impactful. It's hard. It's Dr. Stephanie, hats off to you. It's some hard work, but if I would tend to agree that you have seen organizations that have taken that time and how they've benefited from it.
Oh, most definitely, most definitely. And sometimes too, I even tell people about that work that, we it has to start at the top.
Has to. Has to.
The top will trickle it down, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if we're starting at the top, now we're creating a culture that requires specific behavior
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm,
being able to hold people accountable, whether they have grown or not,
Yes.
to behavior
yes.
can support the journey. You hear what I'm
Mhm.
saying? So
Yes.
once we're in agreement with what the culture should be, and we put in place policies and procedures that support that,
Mm-hmm.
and we have buy-in from leadership to implement those policies for that,
Mm-hmm.
so that we can now deal with behavior, right? Because we can't force people to change, but we can hold you responsible to behave.
Here. Yes, ma'am.
You might not want to grow, but you can behave.
Yes.
And
Yes.
You see what
amen.
I'm saying? So
Exactly.
I think that that's so powerful, that we have to do that. So there's more than one narrative, you know what I'm saying, to start the game going, and
Yes.
people understanding the reality and the power of it, and just the uniqueness of the journey and being creative with the process. I have
Mm-hmm.
seen it work in my workshops, around even my workshop on identity pitch. Something that is 45 minutes, something that's just giving people across narratives language for what they bring to the table. I have seen shift dynamics. I have gotten calls from doing a 45-minute workshop from organizations I didn't even know existed, because
Yeah.
of the impact that it had on the individuals to even recognize their value
Yes. Yes.
That's good.
Yes.
and their desire now to
Mhm.
do the work,
Yes.
because they've recognized greatness in themselves, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
part of my conversation is, you are the gift. Stop giving your power away to titles. Stop giving your power away to that stuff. You are the gift. And when they go,
Yes.
I am, yes, baby, you are the gift. You are what brings that oomph, right? That greatness to those roles and responsibilities. And if you just grow you will
Mhm.
shift the dynamics of your realm of influence. So there's ways to do it that invites people into the deeper conversation. It's just being let's what's the word? Creative,
Yes.
Yes.
to get people to start the conversation for the work.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. One of the things that I know that we have had conversations around are entrepreneurship, women in entrepreneurship, some of the struggles that women in entrepreneurial endeavors are struggling with. And I'd love for us to have a conversation around what should that training look
Mm.
like, even for not just female entrepreneurs, just entrepreneurship, period, in
Mm.
reference to the identity and the leadership piece.
Mm. Well, Dr. Stephanie, you're the serial entrepreneur. You start this one off and I will follow you.
Okay. I still have the same conversation, Dr. Yolanda and Dr. Carolyn. You got to know who you are, because you can be an entrepreneur with a great idea, but if you don't know who you are, whoever you are with the idea will lead the directive. Does that make sense? So you
Yes.
want to be an entrepreneur, but you're a stay-at-home mom with a great idea. And
Hmm.
until you do the identity work to become the entrepreneur, you will be the stay-at-home mom with a good idea. You see what I'm saying? That is the
Yeah.
biggest challenge I see for the work that I do with organizations like the Women's Business Center, or, G-Men in Georgia. The biggest challenge that I have been pitching, I be pitching this, Dr. Carolyn, you got to start with the individual. You cannot make their business great and leave them on the sidelines, because all you're doing is handing them a great vision, but you never did the work for them so that they can support what you've created. And you're
Hmm.
wondering why the numbers are going down. You're wondering why they're not using the money. You're wondering why they're not networking, because you never dealt with her. You
Yeah.
never did the work to grow her. You just grew her business and you left her on the sidelines and you handed her a great business.
Yes. Yes.
But she's not who she needs to be for that new vision. She's still the woman with the idea. You never grew her to be the CEO. You never turned her into a CEO.
Right.
You kept her the woman with the idea. So
Exactly.
that's my biggest challenge. That is the pitch that I give every single time, every event, every organization around entrepreneurship. You have to do the work on the individual as well as the business. Business acumen and personal acumen work together, and you need both in order to make a difference in the work of the entrepreneur.
And I would have to agree, Dr. Stephanie. You can be a student, you could be a stay-at-home mom with a
Yes.
great idea.
Mhm.
But until you still do that individual work on you, you can never scale that thing. You can never grow that thing
Exactly.
because you have not done the work on yourself. You haven't um, looked at, and I won't even say developed a narrative. You haven't even looked
Right.
at yourself to develop a narrative to
Right.
be able to scale that. I'd have to agree with you, and it doesn't matter. I have
Doesn't matter.
students right now that have amazing ideas, amazing, and I'm like, okay, so tell me about this. Oh, I didn't. Me?
Mhm.
Yeah. Is that your passion? Let's talk about you. Let's talk
Yes.
how you are. What do you see in yourself? What are you bringing?
Yes.
Who are you? Because you as a student isn't going to be the same you when you start running that organization.
Yes.
So I need you to project what that person running an organization
Mhm.
is going to be.
Yes.
And you are the only person who can give vision to it.
Yes.
I can give you business plan. I mean, all of us can, but
Mhm.
that's not what you need. Do the internal work first.
Yes.
Exactly. And I believe all training organization, SBDC, small business, I mean, all of those groups, if they do not do that identity piece
That's good.
before even giving monies out,
Yes.
That's good.
they're wondering like, oh, we gave him that money and nothing happened. Oh,
Nothing.
okay.
She said nothing. You're right.
Nothing happened.
Ever.
They weren't able to sustain it. They were sometimes they didn't even start it and end up giving money back.
Correct.
Or they couldn't even give the money out because
Correct.
the women or the entrepreneur wasn't ready. If that identity piece is done, they go in knowing who they are and then they can
Yes.
apply. And if we don't
Yes.
do that kind of work, and they see that as separate,
Mhm.
we have to begin to see that as a part of the holistic training. If you
Yes.
really want to see business owners not just launch but sustain their businesses, you have to do that piece. And I think we
Yes.
just have to continue to have the conversations around it in those
Mhm.
spaces and places so that they understand this is why you're not able to give the money out. This is why
Correct.
they're not ready they may have great ideas, but if
Yes.
that piece is not done, then we're just sitting around saying we have this money, and then you blaming the entrepreneur when you didn't do the full work
You
with
didn't
that
do
individual.
the
Yeah,
full work.
the
And
full
I sit there and go, y'all don't see it? And they be like, no.
work.
But you're building the business and giving it back to someone who might have challenges with fear, whose
Yes,
lived experience has trauma around relationships, who
yes,
doesn't know how to develop engagement.
exactly.
And if you don't do the work around something as simple as limiting beliefs so that they can identify their baggage so that they can work on it.
Exactly.
You know what I'm
Absolutely.
saying?
Absolutely.
Give them the
Absolutely.
tools to grow
Exactly.
themselves. I
Right.
say it all the time. If you go to a networking event, I say, raise your hand. You go to a networking event and you just stand there and look around and then you go home and be like, I'm like, but you need to talk to the people to get the money. You got to,
Right. Exactly.
and you can't blame that you're shy. Shy has nothing to do with it. You cannot blame that you're an introvert. That has nothing to do with it.
That's
What
right.
are the issues and challenges that's keeping you away from? Where do you need to grow? You pull in the Covey conversation. Begin with the end in mind. My
Yes.
statement is always, who do you need to become for that business to be successful? Then you know what you need to work on to
Exactly.
become, so that when you step out, you are who you need to be for that business.
That's exactly right. And as we close out, we could talk all day, you guys.
You know, we could. I was gonna say, yes,
As we close up this conversation, I
Very
want
much so.
to some of the women and men leaders that will be watching this or listening. What is one thing each of you would leave with them as we close out this conversation?
be courageous,
Mhm.
be open to ideas that are beyond you,
Mhm.
and be the empowerment to have those difficult conversations.
Yes.
Yes.
Make it a
Yes.
safe place to have those conversations, to begin to have those conversations.
Mhm.
Yes. I love that. I love that. My advice is that you are just as valuable as the work you do.
Yes.
And if you're putting your work, if you're putting your business before your own growth and development, you're missing an integral part of your business or your professional success.
Mm.
You are just as valuable, and you cannot reduce and put yourself in the background and expect the fulfillment that is going to be required if you are a person who really wants to do things in an impactful way that
Mhm.
is necessary for you to have that type of success that is beyond the money, that's beyond the positions, but it's a place of fulfillment.
Yes.
So you cannot put business, you cannot put those things before you. You
Mhm.
are the gift,
Yes. You
not
are the gift. Did you guys
not
hear
what
that?
you do.
You are the gift, not
Yeah,
what you do. You are
not
the
what
gift.
you do. Yes.
Yes, yes. So Dr. Stephanie, what's next for you? What do you have coming up? How can people reach you?
Next is I am almost finished with my book called Identity: 12
Mhm.
Lessons to Unapologetically Own Your Uniqueness in a World That Doesn't See It as Normal. So,
Oh, I'm ready to
Oh,
read that.
that's
Yes,
good.
yes, yes, yes.
so I'm currently working on and finishing up that book. So that's what I'm doing now. And just going around and doing this, just proclaiming this message of identity centered leadership and the value and importance of us becoming great originals in whatever space, whether it's professional spaces, educational spaces, entrepreneurial spaces, and teaching people how to reverse the understanding and the value of importance of who they are in these spaces. And so you can reach me on LinkedIn, Dr. Stephanie M. Kirkland. You can reach me on Instagram with the same title. My company, identitydynamics.net. And those are how people can reach me.
Great. Dr. Carolyn, what's next for you and how can people reach you?
Well, what is next for me? I'm definitely completing my book, Ladies
Awesome.
Learned from Lessons Learned from Ladies in the C-Suite Club
Nice.
is the name of it, and it is an amazing book on women's leadership, written from a very unusual,
Mm,
rarely talked about position. It's women who have been there and done that,
mm,
and are courageous enough to talk about their journeys,
love it.
to inform the next generation. So that should be out late spring, early summer.
Awesome.
And to reach me, you could certainly reach me. I do have a LinkedIn. It's Dr. Carolyn P. Foster. You can certainly reach me there. My Instagram, my marketing person is working on that.
I
Okay,
understand.
my marketing person is working on my Instagram. I have one, but we're in the process of changing it. Or you could certainly reach me at Kennesaw State, which would be cfost106@kennesaw.edu.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us for this conversation around leadership. And, whether you're in corporate, whether you're in higher ed, whether you're in ministry, some of our ministry leaders, please check this out because it's going to help you as you lead your congregational leaders, your department leaders, entrepreneurs, whatever space you find yourself in and leading. We hope this conversation will help you go to that next level. So thank you guys for joining us for Conversations with Yolanda, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.